Try to mute this. Okay, I'm on a Congress call with Josh.
Thank you all very much for joining us.
Gonna
Pray, and we will get started. Lord, we're grateful for this country that we've been blessed with. It's a country that's seen more blessing, material blessings than probably any nation in our world's history. And Lord, that's also a concern where we can turn materialism into an idol and forget that you are the one who has given us the blessing of liberty and the principles of which our founders took so many things of our Constitution derived from your truths. And I'm asking that you would use all of us that are care about our country to be instructed and wise, and we would discharge the duties and the positions you've given us to make sure that our children and our children's children have this blessing of liberty that we've inherited. And I ask for this call to be blessed, fruitful, and that you would be given glory in the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, we're going to jump right into questions, and we're going to try to make sure that those of you who have taken away time from your busy schedules, your busy lives, to join us, that we can get through questions. So you'll see hopefully a change in us cycling through more questions. And so, Ben, if you will introduce the first person you've got on the phone, we'll start going through those questions.
Yes, our first question is from Roger. Roger in Medill is our first question. And if you have a question, please press *3.
Am I supposed to say it?
Yeah, you wanted, please.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I want to know what we're going to do about these people that are not citizens and the demon Democrats wanting to let them vote. Myself, I don't think if there's an area or wherever, I think it should be shut down. But I don't know whether they're going to get that. They're trying to get that legislation in there, and I don't know whether it's going to be done, and I don't whether it can get through Chuck Schumer and old Gourdhead. I apologize. These people are really what you said. Thank you for that prayer and stuff, and because this country, it's woman, child, and man. I mean, the family is being attacked, and it's ridiculous. And I'm sorry. I'm just concerned about people that shouldn't be here voting that are going to vote, or they're going to let them vote.
Okay, so the Constitution prescribes a role for what the federal government can do, but it also prescribes what the states are supposed to do, and it has to be constitutional for us to meddle. How many things that you've seen the federal government take away from the states turn out very well? I would say you don't see them. And so today, Chip Roy ran a measure on the floor that did pass that is designed to stop illegals, but it does so in a constitutional pathway where it is focused on federal elections, which is what the Constitution prescribes, and so to scrub voter rolls for those that are non-U.S. citizens. And there's a constitutional element also of naturalization of Article 1, Section 8. So there's 2 points that we're utilizing in Chip Roy's bill that passed the House today. But to your point, don't have any expectation the Senate will take that up or that the president will sign it into law. But that does not mean what many of us hope with where we're at right now in this country, and people rightly so seeing the danger ahead. I think it's why the polls show that President Trump is in really good shape. So under a Republican administration and a Republican Senate, then my hope is we're paving a pathway that we need to get signed into law, or those receiving citizenship and fundamentally change this country. Some of you are questioning, I know, well, how do we even know that even with the polling that we'll even have the opportunity for Republican administration given concerns about illegals? This is where the states come in. And there have been some changes where the states have adjusted, and you've got absentee voting has been modified in Georgia since 3.5 years ago. You've also seen ballot harvesting in Minnesota, Supreme Court decision that struck down what they were doing there. There have been some positive changes that state legislatures are doing. And then part of what you're seeing even on the campaigns, the presidential campaign on the Republican side, they are advocating, and I would encourage everyone in Oklahoma to make sure that precincts and poll watchers have high observation, accountability, and sign up to make sure that in your area that you feel comfortable that in your polling place people are being watched. And all across the country, there's a national movement to make sure that's taking place. We can't have the federal government overstepping its constitutional boundaries. Chip Roy's bill threads that needle wisely. I'm the co-author of it. We voted on it today. It passed the House. But we're going to have to make sure that gets signed into law. You've got to make sure this is done in a constitutional way. And state legislatures are given a place in the Constitution to secure their votes also. And like I said, that's been taking place. Next question.
Okay, our next question is from Roxanne in Quapaw. Roxanne, you're now live, and remember, you can press *3 if you would like to ask the question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Roxanne,
am I on here?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you.
Okay. My question right now, with the illegal immigrants that are coming in at the speed that they're coming in, and we know that they're not American citizens, but they go right straight to the Social Security Department and the Welfare Department and get put on Medicaid, Medicare. What are you going to do when there's no Social Security left and there's no Medicare left for the senior citizens of us that are still here in this state? I can tell you right now that they do not have ballots in Quapaw, Oklahoma in Spanish. Because I asked when I voted this last election.
Let me make sure that we scrub this. I was on the on a video interview with the CBO director under this administration, pressing back on them over them trying to, what I believe is, skew the impact of illegal immigrants through their updated budget. So I had the director of the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, and their team on with me and Budget Committee and my team. And one of the things that I wanted to get clarity on is what you're alluding to. What programs do you find that illegals are eligible for? And because there's a lot of confusion in Congress, because people will say, well, they can't even receive Medicaid or SNAP unless they have a child born, and the child becomes then, as a U.S. citizen, eligible, then the household becomes eligible, which that does happen. One of the things that I learned, that I actually told Chip Roy, who was introducing the SAVE Act today, I told him a couple weeks ago, and I've got my staff kind of working on hopefully a fix on this. We can get a change, is on Medicaid and on SNAP, not just their children, but 5 years after they come into this country, there's a process where illegals can be eligible for those programs. Now, Social Security and Medicare are different. I'm not aware of what you're saying is occurring, but happy to look into that more. But I want to make sure we're accurate on that. But I can tell you, after 5 years of them coming illegally into this country, somehow, years prior, they figured out a way to start making those people eligible for Medicaid and SNAP, whereas we initially thought it was only once they had children that their household, their child who was a U.S. citizen would become eligible. And then there's also another element where they get tax credits. That once the child is born, they can get the earned income tax credit. So your point is valid. We as an office are taking it seriously. I am also one of those that's pushing back. Once we found out that this administration, the executive order, was trying to make illegals, the DACA recipients, eligible for Medicaid automatically. So we joined in trying to push back on that, and we've kind of issued some press releases in the last months where we have introduced legislation on that front. And like I said, we're working on legislation to try to stop this 5-year automatic admittance on the Medicaid SNAP front. All right, Ben.
Yeah, if you have a question, please press *3. And if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. Our next question is from Joel in Quapaw. Joel, you're now live.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm a veteran, and I go to the VA for medical. And the Eastern healthcare system, which first of all, I qualify for community care, and I constantly have to fight with those people to get to go to the local doctor. But even though you qualify, and this lady down there, she constantly tells me that they built a whole bunch of new buildings, Tulsa, Muskogee, or wherever, and they're going to try to force everybody to go to those places. I've been to Muskogee, and I got hog cleaners in that hospital. And when you qualify, you should be able to go, and they don't pay the travel pay either when you do go somewhere. And this Eastern healthcare system's awful.
So, thank you for your service. In terms of what you just said, look, this sounds like something that we need to get a field rep with you on. So, as you're still on the line, let's do this. I have actually heard some really good things. In a little less than 2 years that I've been in office about service, VA. I know also we have some people that are going to the outside of our state for VA care. We do, as an office, receive some really good compliments to our VA, but I don't want to discount what you're saying. And so allow us to get a field rep with you so we can dig into this more, and let us do what we can do to make sure that we are fulfilling what Abraham Lincoln put in there to take care of those who serve, their orphan and their widow. That famous plaque that's inscribed as part of VA care and our mission statement. So I think what you're saying, we will follow up.
Well, I appreciate it, but I want to tell you something. I watch C-SPAN, and Blumenthal, and I can't think, Tester or something like that. He's on the Senate side of the VA. The VA make them two look like fools on C-SPAN. So I totally disagree with you when you say they do good stuff. I'm telling you, if you don't deal with them, you don't know how they treat veterans.
Right.
I can understand why veterans commit suicide the way the VA treats people. I mean, if you ain't got the will in you to fight with them, you can't get nothing accomplished.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is,
because I've done it.
Well, look, you've got the context, I don't. So let us follow up. I just want to be honest and make sure I tell you that we've heard a lot of compliments since I've been in office about the change in the last several years, and I assume it's some things that happened before this president took office. But I'm not discounting what you're saying. Don't hear me wrong. I'm just saying we had heard some compliments to the VA in the last many months that I've been in office. So let us follow up with what you're saying, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And I want to make sure that you're getting the quality of care that you deserve. And look, let me just say this. One of the elements where we do get things right in terms of the enumerated or express powers of Congress is to look after the veteran, the orphan, and their widow. 1/4 of our express powers of Congress has to do with our men and women in arms, and how do you recruit them, and how do you keep the promise of them? Those are express powers of our 18 enumerated powers. So that is something that our founders wanted to make sure that Congress do. This is your delineated power. Everything else from the 10th is to be left to the states. And so if we're not getting this right, we are failing core missions. Give us a chance to learn more about your particular concerns and complaints, and let us be your advocate. All right, Ben, next question.
Next question is from Bob and Toto. Bob, you're now live.
Yeah, good evening, Josh. Good to hear you again, brother.
Hey, Bob. Good to hear from you.
My question deals with Social Security.
Okay.
I read a report today that indicated that the trust fund has gained a year on solvency. Instead of 2035, I read that it's 2036 now.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
You're talking about, are you talking about Social Security or Medicare?
Social Security.
Okay, keep going.
Social Security Trust Fund. I know you've been on top of this up there, but what exactly is your office trying to do, or what is Congress trying to do to correct the trust fund where it's there for all of us for, I don't know, the longest that we live, into our 80s?
Yeah, well, so Bob, here's the truth. If Congress remains inactive on this, and I was not aware that on Social Security. Now, Medicare, they have come back with a more positive report. You're educating me in this moment. I did not realize that given another year of time frame for Social Security. So thanks for educating me. We'll look into that and make sure we will confirm that. But I thought it was still 2034. Regardless, whether it's 2034 or 2035, there will be an automatic cut of 24% one of those years. Whether you're right or what I had in my mind still is the figure I had last heard for beneficiaries. And that means that the average person, instead of receiving $1,500, $1,100, that's going to be kind of the change. Unless Congress does something. Why? Because the payroll tax is no longer going to be able to support the outlays, the expenditure. And when Social Security started, you had 150 people paying in and one person receiving the benefit. Now it's 1 in 6. And we have got to, as a Congress, grapple with this situation, or this automatic adjustment will occur. So just to educate people who may not be aware of what you're talking about. And actually, Medicare is on the same trajectory year or two before. That's the one that's had the adjustment. Medicare will hit the same thing. Instead of it being a 24% change hitting beneficiaries, the Medicare insolvency will be a 10% cut that will happen to Medicare Part A, which is the hospital payment. And so that will be not to the beneficiary, that will be the service provider. So we got a massive problem. And what they did in 1983 is they adjusted the age, plus they changed the payroll tax contribution. Instead of holistically 9.3 was where it was at, they bumped it to 15%. Again, if we don't do anything, people say, well, Congress is trying to cut those programs. No, the reality is, if Congress doesn't act, an automatic cut occurs because of the way those are supported, self-supported by payroll. Medicare receives contribution out of the general fund, but Social Security is fully on payroll. So what are we trying to do? What are we doing? Medicare is something I talked to a colleague on the floor about today. I am looking at potentially trying to get on the ENC committee, which has the oversight on the Medicare front, Medicaid, because there is a lot of fraud that is being perpetrated on those two systems. Healthcare is one of our greatest drivers of cost. of all government programming. And so there's many of us that believe that, in the last 10 to 15 years, that a Congress that used to be holistically fixated on what can we do to stop people who are defrauding the system, and really lean in heavy on that. A lot of that oversight work is not taking place. So I'm actually trying to make a move in addition to my Homeland Security and Budget Committee assignments. I'm interested in getting on the Energy and Commerce Committee because of the programs that would have oversight of. What have I voted on thus far? Through the Budget Committee, we have done a Greenspan type reiteration. What brought about the 1983 fix? Now, I don't agree with what they did in '83 holistically, but what they did was they set aside a commission called the Greenspan Commission. They went out and studied this thing and came back, and Congress as a whole then adopted this plan. We passed out of the committee I'm on, the Budget Committee, last month, 2 months ago, maybe longer, a similar template to do the same thing. Now, look, ultimately, it's not the Greenspan Commission or Greenspan 2.0's commission. It's Congress's job to fix this. And so I don't want to pass the buck. There's some hard choices ahead, Bob. There are hard choices ahead because every year that this has been punted and the can's been kicked down the road. So I can't promise everyone who's out there that this is not going to come with some sacrifice. That's the opposite of what's happened. It's always been more benefit and no sacrifice. And that's not what the American experience was built upon. It was built upon sacrificing the next generation. For the last 40 years, it's been really just the opposite, which has provided, this horrible tarmac that we've got to land the plane on. And if I was to tell you what are some reasonable things that we need to reexamine, they really haven't changed in the last 10 to 25 years that people have been talking about this. We've got to have a reexamination of what was the original intent of the programs. They would be anti-poverty programs. They were never designed to be the programs that the culture has said they are today. They were designed to be anti-poverty programs. And so we've got to go back to why did they fix it in 35 and 65? It's because that was life expectancy. And now you got life expectancy that is in the 80s on the average between men and women. And we've got to, if we're going to have a chance to make sure these programs can pay out to my generation, it's not those that are going to be in the next 10 years really those that are going to be impacted. It's going to be the people that are 45 and younger, the ones that have to make sure that they're for them. And so that's my generation. That's my age group. And so we have to be prepared for adjustments to say if we do nothing, this is the consequence. But if we'll go back to the original intent, original mission, we've got a chance to solve these shortfalls among the math. It's a math problem. All right, Ben, next question.
Reminder, to ask a question, please press *3, and to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. Our next caller is Gregory in Muskogee. Gregory, you're now live.
Good evening. And I wanted to ask you, with the recent Chevron ruling, and what your reaction is to that, because I'm pretty well versed with that and what the impact means, considering that, well, the fourth branch of government, unelected people, making all the regulations and mandates that states have been forced to put down on its people, have now gone away. And I'm curious how the state of Oklahoma is going to behave with this newfound freedom from every lettered agency you can think of and their unconstitutional mandates, including the fluoride and no neurotoxin in our water, including the chemtrails and the geoengineering of our weather, the crap in our food, GMO and glyphosate, and all of these things are federal mandates and regulations that we no longer have to follow. So, sorry, wrong question. Curious how Oklahoma is going to react to this newfound freedom of this Chevron reaction. And with that, God bless you.
Yeah, look, this is in the wheelhouse of Congress, right? It's not just won't be an Oklahoma reaction. It has to be Congress as a whole. Just for those who don't know familiar with the Chevron decision, Chevron was a Supreme Court decision that ultimately said that bureaucracy, not the intent of Congress, determined what the court, if a case came before the court and there was a question about what was the intent of this, and it was the bureaucracy that got to determine that. I mean, it's totally upside down from what I experienced years ago on the state level. I mean, on the state level, judges know you study the state legislature discussing an issue, so you can discover if there's some question as to if their language wasn't exactly pronounced, what was the intent, and the judges would make a decision based on legislative intent. On the federal level, the Chevron decision, they were allowing the bureaucracy to determine what the intent is. Totally, to your point, unconstitutional, because Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution says all legislative powers are to be vested in the Congress. So what are we going to do? Mark Green, who's in the Freedom Caucus with me, is also the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee that I serve on. Mark has got a bill where it's going to, on a cyclical basis, revisit every one of these rules that used Chevron to be punitive on the American people, and we would have a re-examination, a revote, and it would come up on a cyclical manner on a legislative calendar. And so Mark Green has a piece of legislation that I think is something we need to march down the pathway on. Gary Palmer from Alabama, who my chief of staff is pretty close to. Gary was assigned to me as somebody that, as a mentor. Gary's got another idea he's talking to my chief about last night, about individually going after different rules that Chevron is impacting. We as a staff, my chief is kind of throwing me an idea I didn't have to fully converse with him on today just because of the busyness today, about what we can be doing to take these on one at a time. So we're very much aware of this. In today's budget committee meeting, I brought up in our budget committee, it's not just the agencies in their capacity, we've also got executive orders. So I was challenging the budget committee today, in light of some conversation we're having, what can we do to be proactive to stop what, if you saw the CBO score on our deficit this year, $200 billion could be ascribed just to Joe Biden. In a 4 to 5 month time period, the CBO adjusted. February, we thought we were going to have a $2 billion, a little less than $2 billion deficit, annual shortfall of revenue to outlays. Now they come back in, it's going to be $400 billion more because of Ukraine spending, which I voted against, supplemental spending that was holistically adjusting that number. But what the president did, student loan bailouts, Medicaid changes for illegal aliens. It kind of was to the first question we were talking about. So I instructed staff after that conversation. I pitched to the entire budget committee, told Matt Thompson, who's our legislative assistant, I want us to run a REINS Act for the executive authority. Kat Kamick from Florida has a REINS Act that would go after executive interpretation or executive actions on rulemaking. I want one. I told him I was supposed to call it the Bridal Act. It's upstream of the REINS. Anybody that's horse savvy knows what I'm talking about there. But we call it the Bridal Act that would be able to put a stop to executive orders that spend dollars. It's just astounding to me to get up here and see how the Constitution is so perverted by those who sit in cubicles and the office holder that is on Pennsylvania Avenue, who doesn't let the power of the purse remain in the hands of Congress. All right, next question.
Next question is from Sharisa in Claremore. Sharisa, you're now live.
Hi. I was just wanting to know. I want to make a statement. I work in public health. I actually am a case manager for a program that is through Medicaid services, and I will tell you at this point, I do know that there are people who are not citizens of the United States, who are actually illegal and here in the United States illegally, that are receiving Social Security benefits and Medicaid benefits. And I know this for a fact because I'm actually taking care of one at this time. So that's number one.
Just kind of interrupt you and ask you, I mean, is this through a diagnosement
Yes,
from a medical doctor that's triggered this?
all they have to be is refugee applicant.
He's on the
Is
plane.
this on old age and survivor benefits, or is this on supplemental on the disability insurance element? Which side? Which of the trust funds is being tapped?
And before
Disability, Social Security disability, and he received Oklahoma Medicaid.
They've cut back 100,000 people.
Right. Now the Medicaid.
Blind
So if you get if a doctor
so they can make room for
creates or provides a diagnosement, the disability can be triggered, which then automatically makes you eligible for Medicaid. So you're educating me in this moment. I was not aware that that would trigger illegals to be covered. So and this just goes to show you how much we're unaware of the way these systems are being gamed. So just for everybody to understand, it's not the old age survivors side trust fund, it's the disability insurance that she's talking about. Keep going. So look, I will tell you, thank you for this. This is what's great about these town halls. My staff and I will be following up on this because as I've told you, we've already instructed my staff. We're going to run legislation on that 5-year gap we found out 2 weeks ago that exists for illegals to be able to find eligibility on Medicaid and SNAP. This is astounding. Keep going.
Well, and just so you know, they are actually wanting to place him in long-term care. He is here in Rogers County, and they want to place him in a nursing home for end-of-life care, you know, and we will be paying for that as taxpayers. We would be paying for that. But that's not my question. I just thought I would point that out, but I do see that, and I see these things in the public health forum that I deal with. I mean,
can I ask you another question on this?
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question? This is someone that's headed to be either hospice bound or long-term care. This was truly a physical diagnosis. This was not a mental health care diagnosis.
No, I have plenty of those too, but not for this gentleman.
Okay, look, it's important for me to get some information. Have you seen any mental health diagnosis that provoked that through illegals?
I have not. Most of the ones I've had have been true physical ailments. Like I had a lady who, she did not speak any English. She was here illegally, but she was also dying of pancreatic cancer. So she needed the care, and I have no issue with that, but I have an issue with the fact that my tax dollars goes to pay for these things, yet, you know, all these other programs for people that I take care of who, you know, have worked their whole lives and are receiving Social Security, are living on $700 a month from Social Security and $15 in food stamps, and they get nothing else.
Okay, when you're defining, do you know if these, I know I'm asking a lot of questions, I'm sorry for that, but
that's okay.
Help us.
That's okay.
You know if these people if they were illegal, if they came through in the last several years and the administration granted them a work permit status, and that could be the trigger that's given them this characteristic to be eligible for SSDI?
No, he has come back and forth from Mexico. He's told me that.
But he has never received a work designation. He never received a. Sorry?
He has gone back and forth from Mexico for several years. He actually told me that he accidentally, is what he told me, voted in an election. And I was
continuing out with you a couple of days ago. We know this is happening with states that are even, Illinois is giving, the Democrats will only concede that they can vote in local elections. They'll concede that. They won't concede what you're saying. Many of us keep saying, look, we are highly convinced these people are finding ways, especially when Illinois is triggering through work. What they've done is they found loopholes to be able to give them, through the way they've changed the parole and asylums, to not legal status. They granted them work permit status, which is in the state of Illinois giving them the ability to check a box, giving them even access to real ID compliant driver's license. This thing is so complex, and it's so amazing how this administration has interpreted this stuff to create these amazing caveats of citizenship-like benefits. Keep going. I'll get to your full question.
That's okay. What my question was, seriously though, is I am an educated woman. I have an education. My husband is educated. We both, and like I was explaining to Ben, we have a combined income of around $100,000. We own our home, but at this point, for the last probably year, it hasn't been so bad up until like the last year. We're barely making ends meet. We're not living off credit cards. We're not living extravagantly. And this is a real concern if Joe Biden gets reelected again. I mean, and it's crazy. Like, you used to go to the Walmart and you'd be like, okay, I spent $50 at Walmart. Well, you can't get out of Walmart for less than 100, and you walk out with a bag, maybe two. I mean, it has really become an issue, and I'm very worried about our country.
Look, is that your full question? I apologize for delaying you. Is that your full question?
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, what are we going to do if he is reelected?
Well, to your point, until we get serious about it, and Republicans hold blame on this as well, not to the full level of encouraging this heightened level of spending we've seen in the last 3 years, but the whole of Congress, the last 40 years, more so time than any other time in history, has allowed the spending to continue. And it's the spending and these annual deficits, compound debt that lead to devaluation of our currency. That is why we see inflation. Yeah, it's on steroids now in the Biden administration because they want to spend, and not do anything to address it. And so that's why, giving Republicans a chance to live up to what we say, actions not deeds, not words. I want to reiterate, everybody's a campaign conservative. It's amazing to me how many will fail to come up here and actually adhere to what they say. But we have got to get serious about spending cuts. Look, anybody who's watched my voting record, you can fact check me on different scorecards. I have been putting my deeds, not just words out there, about my vote. I'm voting for things people look at. Why could you be against that? Because we are losing the ability. You have to ask yourself, to your point, you have to ask yourself the question. Everybody would look at my voting record. Why would you vote against that? Why would you vote to return that to that year's spending levels? Because if you're not asking yourself the question, is my government, whatever my interest is on what government program, are they giving me more than what they're stealing from me in the hidden tax of inflation? You got to be asking yourself that question. That's why I'm challenging. Get on the team of spending cuts, because if you don't, you're either going to see a direct tax in the future when Democrats take over, or you will see the continued hyperinflation, the hidden tax inflation, robbing from you directly every month. That's what you're talking about. Look, my family sees it. We're one household income. My wife and I are having these conversations. We do the Dave Ramsey type budgeting where it's envelopes and, okay, we don't have, and I'm well aware. My wife's saying to me, I cannot understand why we cannot live off the budget we've had on our groceries, why we're having to pull from this budget, and why, so fully understand it, fully know what you're talking about, and the math backs you up. Since 2021, when this administration took office, it's $1,300 more a month to afford the same goods and services compared to when they took office. That is inflation, devaluation of your currency. That's $15,000 over the course of the year that you are spending lost to inflation. $15,000 to the average family of four. So we have to have Republicans that are going to live up to what they say on the campaign trail. Because you don't hear on the opposite side. I'm not trying to be hyper-partisan, but you got to have those that are talking about cutting spending, get in office, and then they got to deliver on that. And you say, well, it's not just cutting spending. How many of you actually believe that you can afford more government. But actually, you believe that you can take more money out of your pocket given to your government to fix the problem. When the facts are this, our revenue stream has continued to be in that 18 to 19 to 20% revenue relative to our GDP, historic norms, and yet we have these problems. It's not a revenue stream. We're receiving historic revenue. Anytime that you ever see a revenue to GDP get above 20%, there's always a tax cut since World War II. Anytime it gets in the 15%, there's always a tax increase. We're in historic norms of the taxation of our people. You say, well, it's that top 1%. Y'all, the top 1% pay 40% of all income taxes. The largest portion of our tax collection, of our revenue collection, comes from income tax. The top 1% already pays 40% of that. And the top 50% of all income earners pay 97% of all income taxes. The bottom 50% of all income earners only pay 2.3% of all income taxes. And the rest of the taxation is built on the corporate tax. The corporate tax, we're at the average of all industrialized nations. We went from 36% pre-tax cuts and Jobs Act to now we're at the average of all countries when we brought it back in the 20 range. And that matters because companies will relocate outside of the United States and take their jobs with them. They are mobile. And so why was it important to make sure that the domicile place of headquarters is in the United States? Because it actually is to our benefit to be competitive in attracting the corporate tax rate. And give you this, pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we were bringing $3.5 trillion in revenue. Here we are, post-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we're bringing in $4.5 trillion in revenue. A trillion more. Why does that trillion more matter? It took us 200 years as a nation to get to $3.5 trillion in revenue. In a matter of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we're bringing in $1 trillion more. Those who are criticizing that corporate tax rate change and what happened on the income taxes is saying it will destroy our revenue. That's not what's happened. What's happened is in 2017, when we were bringing in $3.5 trillion in revenue, we were spending 4.9. But now we're bringing in 4.5 trillion in revenue and spending 6.2 trillion. If we'd have stayed at the same level of spend at the 4.9 of 2017, we're now bringing in 4.5 trillion in revenue. It's what Reagan said. The reason why we have deficits is not because we tax too little. The reason why we have deficits is because we spend too much. So I ask all of you, and join us in championing to your friends and neighbors. That Congress has to get devoted to answering the question, what are you doing to right-size government spending? Don't tell me what you're bringing home in terms of the bacon back to Oklahoma. I criticize anybody who runs on that level of politics today, the free candy politics, because the most effective legislator is not the one who's got that mindset. The most effective legislator is the one who's making sure that money in your pocket is not being devalued by their reckless spending practices. That's the most effective legislator, not the one who says, I'm bringing home the most. Because the one who's bringing home the most by spending more is stealing from you by that hidden tax and inflation. All right, next question.
If you have a question, please press *3. And if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6.
Hey, Ben, before we go to the next question, I want to reiterate this to the people that are online. We are going to be doing live August, second week or third week of August, Townhall. We will have done 100 live town halls across the Oklahoma 2nd Congressional District in my first session of Congress, 118th. Do your time here. We'll have done 100 town halls in the 28 counties. Here's what I would ask you. You're on this call, press *6, and that by pressing *6, you'll get on our newsletter to know where we're going to be for those August town halls. We hope you come see us. And so we're still working through the exact times, locations, and on being in a lot of different places that hopefully be near you. Please press *6, sign up for our newsletter. And that way you will have the latest information on when we're coming to a community so you can interface with us in person. And we'll get to your questions. Your question tonight's not answered. We'll answer it a lot of them all. What's the next question then?
Next question is from Don Claremore. Don, you're now live.
Hi, I'm not in Claremore anymore. I'm in Texas. But my question is,
So where are you at?
Texas, Oklahoma, up by Grand Lake.
Okay.
But my question is, now that Constitution on the table and the horrible debates and public speaking that have just gotten massively worse in the last month, what are we doing about the 25th Amendment? Because if we're doing this for our enemies,
I think it's weird. Yeah. So the 25th Amendment prescribes the vice president with the majority of the cabinet. 25th Amendment is not something that Congress invokes. It's something that only the vice president, read the 25th Amendment, that they invoke. And so the vice president, in this situation, last name Harris, she has to submit a report to the Senate and the House saying that the President of the United States is unable to discharge the duties of the presidency. The President is in a letter that he's not going to step aside. I think unless something's happened in the news cycle that I've not witnessed, I don't see Kamala moving that direction. And at the end of the day, the Constitution prescribes it as the vice president. If that occurs, where they believe that the president is incapacitated to the point of the ability to discharge the duties of that office, it leaves that to the vice president to provoke that.
Okay, our next question is from Dorothy in Grove. Dorothy, you're now live.
In the Defense Authorization Act, that it's not in the congressional version, but it's supposed to go to the Senate, and I wonder how much probability that there is that the Senate will add the drafting of women to the bill, and how we can stop that, because there are so many women that are wives and mothers, and their lives would be turned upside down if they were drafted.
Yeah, so Dorothy, if I'm understanding your question correctly, there's a little faint in hearing you. But I think what you're wondering about is this on the Senate side, what you're hearing as of a week or two ago about some plan to do an automatic draft component to include women. I'm opposed to it. Again, that's on the Senate side, it's not on the House side. There's many of us that will throw a shoe over that change. And so I don't think that has a chance to pass in the House of Representatives. But when you've got the Senate talking about it, it's a real threat. And I'm totally opposed to it. I know a number of members that should be and will be opposed to that. And so, look, if you could just inspire the men on a voluntary basis, not selective service, right? But which we've not had selective service in many decades, but on a voluntary basis, the recruitment goals are down right now. And I blame this administration. Trump was in his time frame, they were meeting recruitment goals. But on the different branches of the armed services, they're not meeting recruitment goals. I said this on the floor a couple of weeks ago. The bulk of our military is built upon men in terms of the numbers. I'm not minimizing the women who choose to serve our country. I am grateful to their service. Those who are volunteering. But in the total numbers, historically where we're at today, it's been young men. And young men are not inspired and I said this on the floor, by becoming a Barbie girl in a Barbie world with this Biden administration through even their promotional activities of trying to feminize our men in arms, our men in uniform. And they are inspired by what they grew up with. They're inspired by G.I. Joe. And so with this drag queen story hours, with these military professionals that will wear long hair one day and short hair the next day and are confused about their identity, that is not encouraging. The majority of men who serve in the armed services, or who have a desire to serve in the army, it's not inspiring them. So they are to blame unto themselves for this woke ideology that has infected our armed services. I've been a part of measures to reverse that, and we have to. Our enemies are laughing at us on this woke garbage. They are laughing at us, and I hope that, look, if I've offended you and you're a Democrat and I've offended you, it's not my desire to offend you. I want you to just really self-analyze and say, what would Eisenhower say? What would MacArthur say? I guarantee you they wouldn't say anything different than what I just said. They would say, this is insanity. All right, Ben, next question.
Remember to press star 3 if you have a question. Our next question is from Dan and Pryor. Dan, you're now live. You there, Dan?
Dan, we can't hear you. Dan, we can hear you. You got to speak a little louder.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I think we both know that this country was founded on Christianity. And I'm in my 40s. Ever since I was a kid, I've been hearing Republicans talking about bringing us back to a Christian nation, and it never happened. I guess my question is, when do we get a theocratic government? And what is the Republicans' plans for creating that theocratic government in a fast time frame?
So, Dan, let me challenge kind of your statement. I do not believe our founders left us a theocratic government. They left us a republic. But to your point, there are a multitude of founding fathers who said that this was a Christian nation. It was founded on biblical virtues. John Jay,
yeah, that's what I'm saying is like holding people, like, why aren't the laws in the Bible the laws of the land here? If we're a Christian nation, then they should be.
Well, our founding fathers left so much into the common law that was built on the Bible. So, we had the Constitution, and then you have elements of gaps that were to be built upon using the common law. The judicial system we inherited from England, from Great Britain, and so much of that was built upon Christianity. I mean, it was built into the common law interpretation, where a judge would pick up a case, and you have judges that would use biblical interpretation to decide cases.
I have the law books.
John Jay, our first Supreme Court justice, put there by under the authority of Washington, and it's affirmed by the Senate. It's John Jay, who also, by the way, we get the name Jay's Treaty that kept us out of a second war with Great Britain because of Jay's Treaty, named after John Jay. He was our diplomat who was brokering that deal with constant communication with George Washington. But it was John Jay, first Supreme Court justice, who said Providence has given to us the choice of our, he used a different word, but it's rulers in the vernacular, or common speak. Providence has given to us the choice of our rulers, which it means leaders in today's language. They use the word rulers because they actually, I will contend the reason why they used rulers back then is because they were looking at biblical interpretation of the Greek and the Hebrew, how the Bible talked about rulers, praying for those in authority. The Bible uses that word. But he said Providence has given us the choice of our rulers, leaders, and it is the duty as well as the privilege of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for that leadership. To use rulers again, but in the common speak, it's leaders. So, I mean, look, and you'll find that type of wording for our founding fathers. They believe we were a Christian nation. It's an ignorance on behalf of people that take office. They're trying to become all things to all people. They're trying to water it down. And I can agree We don't have a religious litmus test. In our Constitution, it actually says that, we don't have a religious litmus test, even for certain offices. But our founders wanted to uphold biblical virtue. And they wanted us to, and people running for office, make a judgment call. Does this person believe in our Judeo-Christian values when I'm going to cast my ballot for them? So this is two-part. It's ignorance on behalf of leadership, of not knowing their Constitution, not knowing our history. But it's also, we have to take responsibility in our culture. Politics is downstream of culture. It would never happen if the pulpit was flaming with righteousness. It wouldn't happen if we didn't have a biblically illiterate society today. That's pretty tough for me to say, but that's the reality. We have people who will claim a false gospel, an anemic gospel, who says that things that are unbiblical about even our stand on marriage, even our stand on life. And look, you ought to not check your brain at the church door. You're doing that, and you're saying, well, my politics are one area, but my faith is an area. That's what you're doing. You're choosing to check your brain at the door. And say, well, I'll set aside my brain for this moment. I'll go to church. But when it comes to the public arena, I'm not bringing that. But don't do that. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. If you believe something on Sunday morning, then you ought to come out and become pure and be separate in the way that you approach your positions in the public sphere. Our founders did it, and our children deserve no less in the way we approach it as leadership and as watching on the wall in our culture today.
All right, and this will be our final question of the night. Richard in Claremore. Richard, you're now live.
Oh.
Richard, can you hear us? We're having some issues. Team, I don't know what's going on. Richard, can you hear us? Richard, can you hear us?
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. We'll move to Tina in McAllister. Tina, you're now live. Tina?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Tina Doyle. I'm in McAllister, Oklahoma, and I have a question. I was wondering if there's any plan to stop illegals from being counted in the census to inflate the districts that have a high concentration of this population, resulting in their overrepresentation in Congress.
Absolutely.
Because
good for you.
Even though they're not receiving, maybe not benefits, or, obviously on this call we heard they are, but I also believe that they're receiving quote unquote benefits because they're being represented, because they're being counted in the censuses. So they're getting representatives in Congress that us in our rural areas don't get, because they're concentrated in typically heavily Democratic areas. So I was wondering if there's a plan to stop this from happening.
Yeah, Chuck Edwards, thank you for the questions. Very, very right on. Chuck Edwards has a bill that we are supportive of that would change this. This is being allowed through insanity, through a Supreme Court decision in 2018 that said that, yes, they can be counted in the census. Donald Trump had as you can imagine, a totally opposite position. This came up under his administration. So we legislatively have to fix this because, to your point, they move in, they go to sanctuary cities, high population areas. Every 10 years, a redrawing of congressional districts takes place based upon census counts. Every congressional district is made up of about 750,000 people. Just in 3.5 years, you have 10 million more, we know, illegals in this country. And so what happens is typipally rural areas lose a rep and urban areas gain a rep, and the urban areas are by high proportionate percentage represented by Democrats. So what you end up doing, you lose a Republican and you pick up a Democrat seat in a head-to-head matchup. In those urban areas, Democrats are always ahead, a no-name Republican against a no-name Democrat because of the ideology. And so we've got to change it legislatively. Chuck Edwards has a bill, and I'm widely supportive of that, and a co-author, as far as I know, I'm a co-author on that also. Hey, listen, thank you all so very much for joining us on this call. This is such a, as I was talking to Jody Arrington, as our budget chairman, a long conversation this morning. Look, I want you to know some of us really see the time that we're in and understand, especially with what's happening with the insolvency within 10 years, absent inaction on Medicare and Social Security, and just our $2 trillion gross national debt loading every year because of $2 trillion deficits. $2 trillion deficits. It's reckless irresponsibility of Congress as a whole. And I blame it on really the most recent representation in Congress. The last 40 years is when we went from $1 trillion in 1980 to where we're at today at $34 trillion and on the uptick. And we understand, those of us that are in the Congress now, if we lay down on the job and we just are happy and content to occupy a position, this country is headed to our knees financially. And so I ask that you would pray, not only for this election that's ahead when it comes to our presidential election, but also pray that Congress, as a spinal transplant, that there is a movement from we the people that is going to make sure that you hold people accountable to do the right thing, not the politically safe thing. And with that, look, please, in August, come attend the town hall. If you didn't get your question answered, you can press *6 right now before we end this call to know when that's going to happen. It will sign you up for our newsletter, that you will get the latest on the times and places of our August town hall series, where we'll complete what has been 100 different live town halls over the course of our first year and a half in office. We want to be accessible, and also you can sign up for that. It'll also put you in contact with how to contact our field reps, how to get in contact with our caseworkers for veterans administration related issues, for legal issues related to
any help whatsoever.
passports and legal immigration, also for other support, typical casework. And you can also call us directly at 202-225-2701 to get in touch with us at DC. I read those call reports on my flights. And then you can also call our district office at 918-283-6262, our Claremore office. And make sure that I've got a field rep that is out there in your area that can come and really spend some time with you. If you've got an issue that we need to get in the field report, where I read those also, to make sure that we're well versed on what you're learning or what you're aware of that we're not. Thank you for even in this call, in this town hall, educating us on what we the people can know, and that you can educate your member of Congress on. God bless you. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
The Access Live event has ended.
Thanks so much for participating in our Teletown Hall event. If you would like to leave a question or comment, please do so after the tone. Thanks again, and have a good evening. God bless you.
If you wish to leave a message, please press 1. Otherwise, you may simply hang up.
Right back, guys.
At the tone, please begin recording your message. When you have finished recording, please hang up.
Okay, so that was that. Anyways, I just like to listen to what they're up to. That's it for the stream.